Welcome back to MSP Cybersecure Conversations. I'm Harriet and I work at Giacom as product manager for all things cybersecurity. Joined today by Acronis, and we're joined by Andy. So, Andy, welcome to MSP Cybersecure Conversations. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, Harriet. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks very much for having me. So, I've been in the cyber protection space for over a decade now. I'm relatively new to Acronis, but my role at Acronis is to lead solutions marketing for Europe, Israel, and Turkey. And I suppose a large part of my job really is translating very technical things that we do into how they address people's challenges, particularly within the cybersecurity space.
Very important role because I think cybersecurity, I like to think that people sit down and just come up with these acronyms and then just put them in the market. And to have someone like you tell us
Very
what they
true.
actually mean is really helpful.
Yeah.
um, so what we wanted to talk about today was the current cybersecurity threat landscape. And this is something we could probably talk about it like every single month for the next year, and it would be a different conversation every time. But with it being such an on tune topic, what would you say are some like typical attack vectors, and how are people getting in?
Sure. So I suppose there's six key areas that attackers use to get into corporations and end users ultimately. Sometimes they don't know who they're getting into. So malicious messages, email attachments, things like social engineering, chat GPT and generative AI is playing a huge role there. Exporting a service is the second. So, if you've got an unpatched application or maybe a misconfigured application and it's publicly accessible, or there's something called fileless attacks that they use sometimes as well, where you don't actually need to send malware. You can have registry resident malware or use stolen credentials. There's also through the use of malicious clouds or websites where they may be abusing a trusted location, or they've redirected or taken over a known legitimate website. Also, supply chain attacks. So there have been several fairly high-profile instances of these recently, where a vendor is compromised and the tools that they delivered to either end users or their MSPs are thus compromised as well, or maybe a SaaS service or MSP itself is actually fully compromised. Or alternatively, there's where known credentials are actually used. Sometimes these can be brute forced, or there's something called credential stuffing, where I'm sure you've seen there have been leaks of huge numbers of credentials online. So sometimes what attackers do is they take those and they try and get into other services using them. Or sometimes there's what's either called a paid dropper or an initial access broker, where someone's actually advertised online that they have access to somewhere that they shouldn't, and they effectively sell that online to a third party who may then go in to exfiltrate data or encrypt it for profit and gain. And the last is obviously the human factor. So either there's a malicious insider, or there's some kind of error that's taken place, or they literally have physical access. They've gained physical access somehow. So those are the typical attack vectors. Obviously, as you said, they change so frequently over time that yeah, it's something you really have to keep a close eye on.
Yeah, you really do because you've listed so many there, and they're those ones that would probably sit at the top of the head of most people. And there is so many, there's so many things to protect, isn't there? And I mean, I've been a sucker for putting my credentials somewhere I shouldn't, and
We all are.
but yeah,
It
and
happens.
you think
Yeah.
I'm savvy to it, I'm good, like I'm not, a weakness for this company, but we all are in some way. Yeah, it's scary, and like you say, they are ever evolving. What do you think is more relevant to 2023? What's happened this year that we haven't seen before?
Sure. So I suppose this year ransomware continues to be a threat, but it's actually dropping. Certainly in most regions of the world. So whilst it's dropping, it's still very relevant, particularly for medium-sized and large enterprises, and for specific industries, those that have very sensitive data, either government or medical or financial or education. There are a lot of data breaches happening through info stealers. What else? Generative AI, I suppose, is probably the most significant impact that we've seen this year. Everyone's heard of Chat GPT at this point, but there are a lot of other tools out there. And where they're useful for legitimate purposes, they are just as useful for illegitimate purposes. Everyone talks about AI as a double-edged sword, and that's very much true in this case. And it's actually very evident in the growth of malware. So in 2023, we saw 250,000 new malware samples per day. So that's new malware never been seen before. And actually
Wow.
the average lifetime of that malware is only 2.1 days, because once it's been detected, it it's able to be detected again easily.
Mm,
So they just keep switching it up, and AI is very, very able to do that. It doesn't take very much to change it.
yeah.
So that's a huge trend for this year. Supply chain attacks, I mentioned, we've seen a number of high profile ones where a tool that's very widely used is compromised, and email borne threats are surging. So we've seen a 464% increase on email borne threats this year. And obviously, those, as I mentioned, take various forms. Phishing is probably the most prolific and the one that everyone recognizes. But then you've got attachments containing malware or ransomware, or links to malicious URLs.
Wow. So 464% more phishing
This year.
emails seen this year,
Yeah,
plus 250,000 new forms of malware every day.
yeah,
Someone is very busy out there doing all of that,
yeah.
aren't they?
Or
That's commitment.
someone's got AI quite busy as well. I think
Yeah.
is the upshot.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. I mean, and once someone's in, what do you do? If someone, compromises me, what should I do?
Well, I suppose in an ideal world, you have a system in place that automatically does something for you, and that is an area that Acronis can help. But in order to understand what you should do, I think it's also useful to understand what they would do once they're in. So once they've gained that initial access, they often plant a back door so that they can continue to get in. They may deploy ransomware. They may use what are called dual intent tools. So that these are tools that are used both for legitimate purposes by network administrators, but they're often used by hackers as well. So that they're tools that look for vulnerabilities. They can be used for penetration testing, or they can be used to gain unauthorized access to networks, steal data, etc. So once they're in and they've got a foothold, they'll start discovering what else is on the environment, what other workloads are there, what data can they steal. They'll read everything they can, any internal wikis or emails on an account that they've got access to, and then they'll start trying to escalate their privileges. And the best way to do that is find out who the admin is, and there are a number of tools that they'll use to do that. So there's one called Mimikatz that effectively they'll use to extract information like passwords and credentials from a system's memory. And there's another one that's commonly used called Bloodhound that basically allows for the analysis of Active Directory rights. So that it's useful to them because they can then identify one that an attacker could use in order to escalate their privileges, and from then on, really, they're trying to evade detection. So they're disabling they're disabling security tools, the tools that might be used by legitimate admins and users to detect them. They'll be deleting backups and logs, turning off any kind of audit trails that they're difficult to detect. And they'll be trying to use, well, they'll be doing something called living off the land. That's basically using native tools. It makes them a lot more difficult to detect if they're not using tools that are known, hacking tools. Then it's that much harder to detect them. And then they'll be trying to move laterally, so they'll be looking to infect other users, maybe sending messages to co-workers of the account that they have access to, and they'll be looking spread across the infrastructure to cause as much havoc as possible. So
Goodness.
yeah, that's what they'll be looking to do once they're in.
Yeah,
They'll be
not
busy.
much. Yeah, I've got like
Yeah.
this vision in my head of them, getting their way in, and then there's these thousands of ants just spreading everywhere, and nothing is safe. And yeah,
That's
so
certainly their goal.
yeah, so you really don't want them getting in, do you? I mean, obviously we don't, but when you list everything that they're looking for, yeah, you don't want them anywhere near you.
I think that the truth is, everyone will be targeted at some point, and there's no 100% foolproof method of preventing every employee being, or an employee doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. So you need to have really good protection in place. And to your point about, what should I do? Really, you don't want to be in a position that you manually have to take action when someone does get in or malware is detected, because it can spread fast. You need to have something in place that will detect it and then inform you that it has been detected, and that is an area that we can help.
So that probably leads quite nicely onto what the key steps an MSP can take to protect their customers. Because, like you say, that the ideal world, there is no human risk because you have got all of those defense things in place. So yeah, what would the key steps for an MSP be?
Sure. So I suppose number one is regular patching and software updates. It's it's easy for hackers to detect vulnerabilities. There are tools that scan for vulnerabilities in outdated software. So MSPs should ensure that all systems, applications, and devices are regularly and automatically patched. That's an area where Acronis can help, and Acronis and Giacom can help, which is good news. Endpoint security, so installing and managing advanced endpoint security on all devices, including antivirus, anti-malware. I mentioned, ideally you don't want there to be a necessary manual step if and when malware gets onto your network or a malicious actor gets onto your network. So Acronis offers something called EDR,
Mhm.
endpoint detection and response, and it really is designed to enable the automatic shutdown of threats once they're detected on the network. And unlike most other EDR solutions, you don't have to be a real cybersecurity professional to use and manage it. The kind of threat analysis is delivered in really plain English, so no horrific acronyms to get confused by. And because Acronis also do backup disaster recovery, there's a single click rollback so that you can one, isolate a device from the network so that attackers aren't able to spread, and then two, revert to the point before the infection took place so that you can get straight back up and running as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and that's
Uh,
that's such like a great thing about Acronis is that we obviously work with so many different security vendors who are, helping you defend and helping you be aware to all the threats in the market. Um, but yeah, ultimately, whatever was on that PC before, you need it back and you need that backup. And
and
backup is like,
fast.
yeah, and it's like that unsung hero of it could easily get forgotten, but my word, is it important.
It really is important. So endpoint security, never a good idea to forget training and awareness amongst
Mm,
employees. The human factor is often the weakest link. So regular training sessions are a must, and it's good to conduct simulated phishing attacks as well. You probably have
yeah.
these in Giacom, I'm sure, where you
Oh
receive
yeah.
email that it looks like it might be genuine from a coworker, and then you look at the from, and it's a bit unexpected, shall we say?
Oh, the one we had recently was I think it was like a £250 voucher. I clicked on it. They knew how to got
and
me. Yeah.
and there we are. There's no foolproof solution.
Yeah.
Training's never perfect, so you really do need good protection in place.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And encourage a blame-free culture. Everyone makes mistakes. Being afraid to report having made a mistake is not a good culture to have. Backup and
Hmm.
disaster recovery we mentioned, so you really do need to have a good backup strategy in place. You need to ensure that you can recover malware free. So you need to be scanning your backups for malware. There's no point detecting malware and then recovering it. Malware often sits dormant on a system, sometimes for as long as 200 days. That's deliberate.
Wow.
That means that it's in every retention point within a lot of people's backup strategies. So there isn't a point prior to the infection taking place that you can recover to. And there are a lot of horror stories of people trying to recover. Ransomware redeploys over and over and over again. It's a horrible way to waste a lot of time. So you need to be able to recover malware free. You need to test your backups frequently. You need to test your disaster recovery plan frequently and have a disaster recovery plan. Unfortunately, with some technologies, that's a very time consuming thing to do to test your DR process. Thankfully, with Acronis, it's not. It's something that you can do with the click of a button. Um, Network security. So you should have good network security in place. You should also separate roles as much as possible. By that, I mean, if you have someone responsible for your live environment, having the same person, whether it's your Active Directory or your Microsoft 365 instance, having the same person responsible for all of the protection, the cold data, your backup environment. Basically, if that person becomes a malicious actor, malicious insider, they could do a lot of damage to both your production environment and your backup data, which is a threat. And of course, always have multi-factor authentication in place.
Yes. Very important, that one. Yeah. Often forgotten. So there is loads of things that Acronis can help our MSP network with. Um, but the other thing that
There are. I think one I've potentially not mentioned yet is we do advanced email security, which I think of all the things that I've mentioned today, with 464% increase in threats via email, it's definitely an area that's uh, worth considering if you don't have something in place for that currently.
oh yeah, yeah. If that's their easiest route in, that's probably the first thing you should be protecting.
It is,
Yeah.
and the nice thing about our advanced email security offering is that it comes with what's called a SOC. It's basically a managed response, so that there's people there waiting to act when a threat's detected, so that again there isn't a manual action required from the customer in order to protect against a threat and to react to a threat to shut it down.
Yeah, you've already got those experts on standby. That's quite a
Yeah.
nice, reassuring feeling, yeah. And there's something that we can share with MSPs between the two of us, and that's your biannual cyber threat report. Um, so talk us through what that looks like and how do you find that information?
Sure. So it's essentially a lot of the information that I've been talking through is exactly the sort of information that's contained within the report. We obviously have a huge footprint when it comes to devices and organizations protected through our Cyber Protect Cloud and Cyber Protect platforms. And we gather, anonymized data from all of those endpoints around threats that are detected, and that enables us to put together a very enlightening report twice a year that highlights what the threats are, how they're coming in, and we also, through some of our other services, such as our advanced pack that covers security and endpoint detection and response. We gain a lot of insight into what hackers are doing and what they're doing once they're on a network as well. So what what tools are used and what they're looking to achieve, and who the key actors are as well, is another area that's covered in the report. So if you want to get your hands on it, if you want to read a little bit more into the topic, then Giacom can help, and I believe that a URL potentially might be shown at the end of this video as well.
Yeah, we'll make sure everyone has access to that. But it's good to know that Acronis are there to support us, to support our MSPs, and that as the MSP, you can have a look through that report, and that is going to help you explain to your client, this is why you need this, and this is why you need this. And it's not just because we want to sell you loads, it's because here's what will happen if you don't get it. So
Indeed.
it's just an extra tool. It's something else we can keep in our belt that makes the world of cybersecurity that little bit more understandable and relatable. So yeah, really powerful thing. We'll make sure we can either have a link somewhere or we'll share it with our partners.
Brilliant.
Um, that was really interesting to listen to. Loads of things to be terrified of, but also loads of
Unfortunately,
things
yes.
you can implement to not be so scared.
Yeah, it's a very interesting space. A lot of change happening very quickly. Some of it is unfortunately a little bit off-putting. The consequences of getting it wrong are
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll say no more. Yeah, uh, there's a lot that you need to do to protect yourself, but companies like Acronis and Giacom can help.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why we work so well together. But I really appreciate your time, Andy. Thank you.
Thank
Um,
you. Yeah, it's been great
we'll
to
let
be
you know
here.
when this goes out, but yeah, really informative. Thank you.
Excellent. Cheers. Thanks.
See ya.
Goodbye.